Today we are going to be discussing what laws, whose laws in Pakistan. And when it comes to the question of the making of laws, there is always a philosophy at the root of it, and what we call jurisprudence, the philosophy of lawmaking. And when we talk about the philosophy of lawmaking, we have to inevitably refer to sociology. Sociology as it exists in Islam and as it exists in various parts of the world. They have to adopt a philosophy on the basis of which you can start engineering laws that can be invoked in any social environment. Now, before we address the aspects of lawmaking or start questioning the laws that exist in Pakistan, I think what may be of interest to you is a little bit of a historical background into sociology. Now, as it comes to my mind, and as I have said through charts, which I have introduced in my book, The Current Chronicles, human society has had a history where there have been two particular ailments. One is called extreme materialism, and the other is called extreme mysticism, bracketed with monasticism. And if you would like to see in this day and age an example of extreme materialism, you need to go to Europe. And if you want to go and see extreme mysticism or monasticism, you have to go to Varanasi or Banaras in India, where people have a death wish, i.e. in Varanasi. If you go to Europe, they are worshippers of material. They are material worshippers. So when you reflect by the Islamic faith, if you reflect on what did actually happen and what does that document which came to us from our Creator, Allah, we will come to the conclusion that He sent 124,000 prophets into various regions of the world, spread over time, starting from Adam and on to the last prophet. So, when did these prophets come? These prophets, all of them, came at a time when society, wherever they were sent, when society had leaned to one of the two extremes. They had either gone overly materialistic or they had become overly mystic. Now, they all came with one job description, all the prophets. And that job description was to set the balance right. That means there is a middle path which does not represent extreme materialism, does not represent extreme mysticism. And that middle path was based on one of the aspects of the two religions that exist on the planet, i.e. monotheism, and the other was polytheism. So, monotheistic religions had only one message to give, and the purpose of their being surfacing on the earth was to set the balance right. Now, when we go and examine the leadership of these two ailments, we will see that in the case of extreme mysticism, you will find Maulvis, Pandits, Padres, monks, the like. If you go to extreme materialistic societies, you will find kings, dictators, usurpers, the like. Both of these poles in society are alienated from the commoner. So, giving you a rundown from the religious perspective, the leadership which becomes a role model are not in consonance with what the commoner is supposed to be. So the leadership in materialistic societies are monarchs. They're different. They live in different abodes. Their attires are different, and their economics is based on subjugating a factor of production called labor, capital, usurpation of land, and the complete control over capital and enterprise as a consequence. The mystics, on the other hand, also wear a different attire, live in different abodes. Some live in mosques, some live in monasteries, some live in places which are obviously not available to commoners. And their economic bedrock is selling the future. There is another agenda. Both these poles, although they oppose each other, on the face of it, have been pseudo-partners in human history. When a guy who's usurped your land, usurped your labor, beats you up for non-compliance, you go running to the mystic. I mean, you go running to the Maulvi or to the monk or to the Pandit in your place, and what do you get to hear? You get to hear that, my dear friend, be patient. This world is for this scoundrel, and when you go to heaven, you will be amply rewarded. So they are pseudo-partners. So in the message of Islam, from the point of view of sociology, the bottom line was establishing a just society, and fighting oppression in every form that it should become manifest. And that is why the element of jihad. Now, this is the background of what has happened over the years in human history. I'll take you to another factor of sociology, again based on the Quran, based on our book which we follow, and that is the nomenclatured order of societies. Every society has had 90% or plus people who are called commoners, who are obviously not jurists and whose educational and mental levels are just related to finding a livelihood and remaining alive. 10% or less have been the echelon of society. They comprise of poets and thinkers and writers and politicians and whatever else have you, teachers. But we get to see from the scripture, the divine scripture, that in every period of time, from when society started to right now, there is a commitment that there will be a number of people you can count on your fingertips who will have a level of knowledge which is above that of the echelon. In every period of time, the echelon of the society, which is 10% or less, have found these few people which you can count on your fingertips as a threat and have eliminated them, have tortured them, have killed them. And the reason has been simple, that these few that you can count on your fingertips have always had their sympathies with the commoners, i.e. 90% plus, not with the echelon. And the reason has been very simple, that the echelon tend to usurp a factor of equality and equity from society. That is what they rob. So when you want to look at an ideal social order anywhere in the world, based on the background I've just narrated to you, you will have to obviously address two things. One, the economic order that you have in the society, and the social order. And for both these particular poles, there is a defined recipe which is based on the set of laws which are promulgated or legislated in any social environment. These laws have to be obviously based on a philosophy, as I said at the outset, and this philosophy has to have roots in either monotheism or polytheism. So if you have roots in monotheism, you are comfortable because you are definitely addressing the factor of equity and equality. With this as the background, we have to come now and see and examine the legal fabric which exists in Pakistan. Now, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan cannot, by the nature of it being Islamic, endorse or in any way subscribe to the nation-state concept. We believe, under Muslim philosophy, that there is an ummah. Anybody who believes, who is a monotheist and who subscribe to the religion of Islam are one nation. So you can have administrative units as many as you want, but you cannot be contained politically as a nation state as you have been created and carved out, more so by the colonists after the First World War. Now this is an interesting dialogue, but we will probably take it up in another talk session. But for the moment, when we address the laws in Pakistan, the principal author has been Lord Macaulay, 1866. He gave you the penal code, gave you criminal laws, set of civil laws. And these laws were obviously based on a philosophy which is contrary to the philosophy of your religion. So while you call yourself the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, the dichotomy in the structure of the law is not in consonance. Where did Macaulay make the difference? Macaulay made a difference where the laws empowered the agencies of the state to be rulers and the people to be servants. in an independent order, in an independent territory, if you go by Islamic philosophies or the Islamic philosophy, then the people have to be empowered to be rulers, and the agencies, the institutions of the state have to be servants. So from the colonial perspective, he was spot on. He did the right thing. But for us to have carried on with it for 7+ decades is really absurd and nonsensical. Now, therefore, there are two things which have become incumbent for us to address. One is the identification of an economic destination, so that we have the laws that will bring about equality and equity in the society for all. And the other, of course, are social reforms, which we are here to discuss today. And that again will bring about a different mindset. Because if you view again the history of human civilization, sociologists will tell you that the human civilization has transited to about 23 times from the Sumar Valley to the latest civilization, which is the American civilization. And one wonders that if the American civilization is the latest civilization, what do we attribute that position to? We attribute that position to a legal system, and we attribute that position to their place in material technology, how they have evolved in material technology and where do they stand right now. So we refer to them as the latest civilization on the planet. It reminds me of an injunction of the Quran which says that migration should be continuous and compulsive. It is every day your knowledge base has to transit from where it is to a notch ahead. And when you look at the evolutionary mechanism of human civilization, you also will see that when the knowledge base of the echelon in any given society was commonly available to the commoners, it was presumed that human civilization has evolved a notch ahead. Societies which are referred to as being fascist are those where the echelon block this evolutionary mechanism, this transition of knowledge from them to the commoners. So the commoners they stand enslaved. In the Pakistan scenario, because of the lack of proper economic planning and autarky, and our reliance on a feudal structure for management, what has happened is that we have managed to surrender to one institution of the state the management of this nation state. We have also managed to prevent the country and the populace in the country from evolving because knowledge is not amply available to them. And this, in real terms, in real constitutional and religious terms both, is a criminal, an absolutely criminal state of affairs on the ground right now. And this is what needs to be addressed. So if social reforms have to take place in this country, we need to kill feudalism, the mindset, the feudal mindset, whether it is institutional or whether it is at the level of individuals. And to do that, we have to eliminate the captivity of land through any mechanism, be it usurpation or a legal fiddle, to be a factor of inheritance. You use land, but you pay for it. Once you do that, the factors of social reforms instantly come into place. Because if I'm living on a plot of land, and if I'm working on another plot of land, and if I need to pay for it, I need a revenue source. I need a revenue stream. And that revenue stream comes out of an intrinsic factor of my being, which is called labor. I have to labor. I have to think. I have to move to be able to strive, to be able to exist. But the minute I feel that the land I'm living on or the land I'm working on is something which I have inherited and will give me enough to be able to subsist, the pace of my life will automatically come down, and I will become reliant more so on self-glorification instead of striving to enhance my faculties, my knowledge base. So from the barometer of human civilization, I would be either stagnating or regressing. So from the Pakistan perspective, there are, and as I have said in my book and in this paper, the socio-economic destination for Pakistan, land has to be taken away so that the feudal mindset can be finally laid to rest. And land has to be attached to a cost and must be owned by the Federation, although we don't believe in the nation-state concept. But since we are a nation-state, therefore, for social resurgence, we need to take away land and attach a cost factor to it. And that is true for not only living, but that is true for working as well. That means whether you go for agriculture, or you go for mining, or you go for an industrial setup, or you go for a trading house, you need to pay tax on land and land alone. That will sort of trigger the generator of human innovation and abilities to acquire knowledge, move ahead, and come into pace with anything which is presently called the developed world. And the second thing, because these are the two things which are important for our existence, the second thing is the identification of an economic destination, for which, of course, I have proposed urbanization, vertical urbanization, spread over about 3,400 municipal units at the front end of technology and based on standards which are at the front end of known technology, whether it is a waste compaction unit or it is a sewerage system, or are there roads or communication or lighting or schools, hospitals. You will have to train a population and you'll have to put them to use. To address both these issues, the common opposition, the common explanation for not doing it, for defending the status quo, has been, where will we get the resources from? How can we get the resources? Who will give us the money? And that is the most nonsensical bit of an alibi that I have heard in my years of existence. Money is basically a consequence of labor. It is not. And labor is not only physical labor, it is mental labor. It is your ingenuity. You create money. But if you stop creating money, if you stop creating wealth assessments, then you are a beggar and you're borrowing. Since the country is being run by one institution of the state and not by the people, that is why we have murdered our faculties and we are now in a state of being beggars. And that is unacceptable. So with this background on the sociological paradigms that do exist, we have to view our laws, because the current laws have to be simply scrapped. They were meant for the colonists, they were not meant for a free nation. I would like to take questions after this, if there are any to be answered.
Sir, you talked about, first of all, let's go back to the final point. You talked about how we can renew the older laws. Do you have any framework that how can we implement newer laws and replace the old ones? Because people would not be accepting at the start of it. We have been trying to overrule the blasphemy law. We have been trying to overrule a lot of different laws. They always get small amendments, but they never get the complete transformation that the society desires.
You see, all legislation cannot be piecemeal. You have to have a philosophy on the table. So the whole set of laws, the entire penal code, has to be re-engineered based on the philosophy you're following. What you are referring to are aspects of different amendments which have come about in the last 70 years, which have affected, influenced various aspects of problems that have emerged from time to time. For instance, we took up a law declaring the Qadianis as a minority. We picked up a law where we went and we restricted our entrepreneurs from investing all over the world. These were dictated positions that our legislators have had to take or have been accustomed to taking in the last 70 years. So by promulgating a canon of your constitution, a clause in your constitution that everything was going to be in consonance with Islam, well then you should have just thrown away your constitution, because your Quran is your constitution. You should have had a set of statutes that would have been like you have in the United Kingdom. They don't have a constitution, they have statutes. But the philosophy of lawmaking there is based on permissive limits. In Pakistan, if we have the same thing, our permissive limits are based on hudud laws and on halal and haram. And there are no sectarian opinions which are in conflict with each other when it comes to this. It's very simple, very basic. Just let's stick to it. You see, let's take the aspect of this country saving its reserves in US dollars. The injunction of Islam says the life and property of the Ummah must be protected by the Ummah. So where does United States fit into this? They don't. We cannot accept it. Why is it not a tangible? Why is it somebody else's printed paper? So there is a mindset of the rulers who are there on an illegal basis because of these laws that were left behind by the colonists to run the country. The laws have to be engineered on the basis of a philosophy. Our philosophy is Islam. If our philosophy is based on Islam, that's where we go. Unfortunately, what is projected of Islam is the length of your kurta and the length of your pajamas and what you wear on your head. But that is not Islam. That is your attire. Like I just told you at the beginning, that when you take a Maulvi or you take a king, they have different attires. They are not that of the commoner. So these are attires. They are personal beliefs. The law is very different. It is based on equity and equality. There is masawat in Islam. You go to a hospital, a public hospital belonging to the government, say Jinnah Hospital. There are VIP rooms. Who's the VIP? And I'm not talking about communism here, I'm not talking about socialism here, I'm talking about standards here. The life of a man who's probably a janitor working with the Karachi Municipal Corporation is as important and as valid as the life of Dr. Alvi sitting in the presidency. They have to be given the same treatment when it comes to the services the government should make available. It is not there. And you can't question it, because the minute you question it, there are laws, colonial laws, for them to give you a justification. This time is more important. This time is not more important. It's life. It's the continuity of life.
So, yeah, you first, your proposal, the first proposal, is what I need some clarification upon, for example. So, just like you said that the land must belong to the nation state, which is, in other words, the abolition of the private property. Now, the thing is that if, for example, everything should belong to the nation state, then the nation state should be guided by some interest under which it should take every action, every decision, whatever it is taking. And then the second proposal says that there is an economic goal that should be in place for the government to follow, the government institution to follow. Now, in the globalized world where economic interest is rife with self-interest, how is it that the government institution will make sure that the capitalistic barbarism is not overtaking the justice, the harmonious justice model that you are proposing?
Point one, I must clarify that I am not against private property ownership. I live in a house and I pay property tax. If I continue to do the payment, the property will keep belonging to me. So it is not the abolition of one's ability to have private property. You can have private property, you must pay for it. First clarification. The second thing which you raised was on the question of the global order, right? The global order is indoctrinated by a capitalist world where in their set of economics the first law is that it is secular, so everybody works for himself. In an Islamic order, it is slightly different. We work for the community, we work for our society, we work for collective welfare. So when you want to implement your own laws or you want to change your own laws, you obviously have to throw their laws out of the window. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, there are other models which exist. Let's take the United States itself. You have Amish people living there. They don't follow the law. They follow their own set of laws. They don't go in harmony with modern technology, and they're still going on horse-driven carts. That's their way of life. We are talking of 220 million people here wanting to have their own way of life. So if you're not a beggar and if you're not being dictated to by donors, you can have your own way of life. Nobody is going to kill you, nobody is going to drown you in the Arabian Sea. You're at liberty to do so. You make a model. And when you make a model and it is egalitarian, the huge 7.6 billion people that inhabit this planet, and the predominant lot of which are impoverished. I mean, they don't have money, they're poor, they don't have a proper meal. They would love to copy your model. So we really don't have to go into discussing the merits and the demerits of capitalism or communism or socialism. We have to talk about our own model. How do we structure our own model? How do we implement it for the benefit of us the people? That's it.
You said something about whether we can follow Islamic laws or we can make a constitution of our own. Is it really such a good idea if we follow Quran blindly and as it is in this day and age, considering that everybody has their own set of beliefs now, and even the interpretation that we get from our religion is different for everyone? Is it a good idea if we follow Quran only and solely?
It's a sorry thing to reflect on, the breakup we have in the Islamic community and the diversity we have in the interpretation of the book. But like in social orders of monarchies, you have a king and he's the law. In Islam, you need a benchmark just like that. So what I did say was that we should have Quran as our constitution because that's the benchmark on the basis of which you can debate the implementation or the validity of your statutes that you want to promulgate. You run the country on the basis of statutes. So, if you promulgate a law that says that, all right, whether you are Christians, Jews, Hindus, Qadianis or whatever else, you will all have the same civic rights in Pakistan. That would be absolutely in consonance with the Quran. That you will not borrow money from alien sources in consonance with the Quran. That you will not be subservient to any other power except that of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala in consonance with the Quran. There is no dichotomy. The sects are there to feed, as I have said recurrently, to feed the various religious cults headed by various clerics that have come about within Islam. They have no place. And as I explained in the last talk session, that if you go to Surah Rum, the 30th Surah of the Quran, you reflect on the 31st and the 32nd ayat therein, God has made a declaration straight off. These sects are made by you, and you pride in the fact that my sect is bigger and stronger. So these sects have no place. The clergy has no place in Islam either. We are talking of laws that have to address humanity, human concerns. The concerns of how we can protect our trees, how we can protect our animals, how we can protect our humans, our children, how we can provide equal opportunity for education, for healthcare. That's what we are talking about in laws. We do not want a law which is being practiced right now, which is based on the caste system, for instance, like you see in India. And we are practicing that. And we cannot. You tell me, in Sindh, where we are sitting right now, can a Hari stand up in any court of law and challenge the authority of a Vadera? Cannot. Can you stand up, challenge the authority of a judge who has not been straight and has been corrupt? You cannot. Can you stand up and challenge the authority of a general in the army who has been corrupt? You cannot. All these institutions have promulgated laws to protect their hegemony. If you go against the army, they'll say you are talking of subversion. You go against the civil bureaucracy, they'll say you're talking of sedition. You go against the judiciary, they'll say you're talking of contempt. I'll take you in for contempt. And then you have politicians who have made it a profitable business for their families. You know, it is not democracy. It is neither Western nor Eastern nor any form of democracy. Islam promotes democracy, but not in this form. So when you take the Quran as the benchmark and call it your constitution and run the country on the basis of statutes, you're just doing fine. They're doing that in England as well. The Queen is the ultimate form, represents your sovereignty. The country is being run on statutes, which they are evolving, changing with the passage of time and on the basis of popular consensus, permissive limits. And this is what we need here. Otherwise, what is happening is that the predominant lot of your society are subject to deprivation. They are being ignored. They are being abused. And there is a frustration level which has crossed all limits. Look at the amount of children who are being abused in this country. Look at the amount of poor who sleep hungry. Look at the amount of people who go without health care. Look at the amount of children begging on the streets that are deprived of education. What sort of a country is this? And when you talk to anybody in power, they come around and tell you, well, we don't have the resources. Kick them out because they're incompetent. They don't know what resources mean. They can't spell resources. They need to be thrown out. They're just incompetent. They're not fit to run the country. But they're there because you've empowered them. And the rulers are taking their dictates because the rulers are being paid. They're taking their dictates from donors. Your geopolitical relevance is for meeting with the interests of the donors, not your own. Otherwise, your geopolitical validity is an opportunity in its own right. So this is how I would respond to what you've just said.
Colonialism or colonists were more powered by resource usurpation to get rid of their territorial deprivation. They would make colonies because they wouldn't have certain resources. One of the reasons was that they would make colonies because they didn't have certain resources within their own territories, and then they would create colonies to fulfill their deprivations. However, present laws in Britain enable the people to question who rule them and can even ask for resignations for the people who come in power if they fail to fulfill the responsibilities. The question is, how are these laws, which we're talking about scrapping colonial, if they empower people to this extent, when even 25A of the Constitution of Pakistan talks about creating a mechanism for free education up till the age of 16, which also provides evidence as to how these laws are not colonial. Is it their implementation, lack of their implementation, which is a question? If so, then how would a replacement of this law with an Islamic law solve the problem when the problem doesn't lie in the laws, but rather in the implementation?
Implementation is entirely based on fiscal empowerment. Fiscal empowerment is based on, let me give you an example. Let's take Turkey. Just a few days ago, they said everybody above the age of 65, irrespective of being a family unit or not, will get so much money. Take Singapore, take Germany, take the UK. They're paying money to the people above the age of 65. Whether they work or they don't work, they get enough money to live, eat nourishing food, put clothes on their body, and live under a protected roof. You can't do it. You will not do it. You can't do it for two reasons. Number one, as I have heard, that the amount of money in circulation in Pakistan is regulated by the central bank, which is in the dictates of your donors. You can only print that much of money, no more. Number two, that your assemblies are full of these feudals. They have captive constituencies. If you empower people above the age of 65, their hold on their population goes. If I am living on the land of a Vadera or a Sardar or a Chaudhry or a Malik, and he gives me 2 pairs of clothes a year and says, all right, this is the amount of money I'm going to pay you, and you have to remain content. You can't leave, you can't do anything, your labor is compulsive. You have to work for me, and this is all I'm going to pay you. I'm trapped. The minute I start getting money from the government, I'm on dole, I'll say, the hell with you. I'm on my own. I'm not following your orders, I'm not working. Have you ever reflected upon the amount of old men and women begging on the street? Or old men and women plowing fields? Or doing menial jobs? Is this an Islamic society? Or is this an oppressive society? If this is an oppressive society, the oppressors have to be removed. So, fiscal empowerment is criteria number one. Political will, based upon the laws that are there, which have been promulgated to be showcased, will obviously come into place. So, fiscal empowerment is at the root. The cost of managing a population in most developed countries of the world, please reflect on it. The children which are being born, the government is paying for it. Whether it is a capitalist or a communist society, irrespective, the children that are being educated are being paid for by the government. The old people who cannot work are being paid for. It is only a certain percentage, which you have a very high percentage in Pakistan, of people who can labor are not being paid, but they are laboring to get a wage as compensation. So everybody in the society is being taken care of. Now that is the cost of running a nation state. It's just like running an industry. Now hypothetically, if that figure is $100 and the government, because of their inability to forego their hold on the population, is not providing for that 100 rupees, they need to be evicted. That's as simple as that. Pakistan has got ample resources, even by, forget about our own statistics, even by the statistics presented by UNDP, to support a population at the front end of technology, at the highest standards of subsistence, a population of 1 billion people. You've got enough resources. So where are we going wrong? Why are we going wrong? So all the social evils that come in, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam made a comment about poverty, equated poverty with Red Death. All the evils you see in society are as a consequence of poverty. In a country where you've got ample, why is there poverty? Poverty is there because you have an oppressor, you have a usurper in office. That's it. So it's not rocket science.
Talking about the Vadera system, especially I'll talk about sin. We all know the condition of sin, and the feudal landlords, they stop people from evolving, from getting education. Now this is one thing. And they play on the concept of Islamic Republic of Pakistan. So until unless I don't educate someone, they don't educate, because if the landlord is going to educate the lower class, tomorrow they'll stand up, they are going to ask for their own rights. On the other hand, they play on the Islamic ideology of Islamic Republic of Pakistan, where I remember something, as Hazrat Umar said, कि गली के कोने पे भी अगर एक कुत्ता भूखा सो जाएगा तो उसका भी मैं जिम्मेदार हूँ. I'll be answerable for that as well. इधर लोगों का माइंडसेट ना चेंज हुआ कर दिया है, स्पेशली सिंध में, कि ये वडेरे उस माइंडसेट को ही चेंज नहीं करना चाह रहे, वो उनको दबा के रखते हैं. They don't provide education, they don't उनको एक बक्से में रखा हुआ है, बाहर की चीज़ें नहीं दिखाते, और उनका वाकई इतना ज़्यादा ब्रेन वॉश हुआ हुआ है लोगों का कि उनको बाहर की दुनिया पता ही नहीं. तो वो ब्रेन वॉश कैसे चेंज होगा?
देखिए,
also there are schools, तो वहाँ पे schools बने हुए हैं लेकिन वहाँ education ही नहीं है. सारी चीज़ें हैं, गवर्नमेंट को ये चीज़ ऑलरेडी पता भी है. देखें, अगर हम जैसे लोगों को सारा यहाँ चीज़ें पता होती हैं, गवर्नमेंट ऑल्सो नो कि वहाँ पे एक स्कूल है लेकिन वहाँ स्कूल पे एजुकेशन नहीं दी जा रही. So is the government, so basically there are two questions. One I've already asked. The other one is the government afraid by the fear that ye feudal lords, they are going to resist against them as well?
You see, number one, change comes about when you present something better. It is not the job of the Sindh government, it is the job of the federal government to provide dole. Sindh is just one province of the many that exist in Pakistan, of the several. So the minute you fiscally empower the population, Sindh government can do nothing about it. The Vadera can do nothing about it. And you don't fiscally empower them through politicians or through MNAs and MPAs, you fiscally empower them through banks. That in itself causes a revolution. The second thing which I had proposed, or which I have proposed in this book, is urbanization. When you urbanize the population from the living conditions they are in, you go to Thar. A woman or a man has to walk several kilometers to be able to pick up water and bring it back home. You urbanize it. You provide all the facilities, vertical facilities. You think that man is going to ever be under any factor of subservience to a Vadera? Out of the question. You change the whole social order. The fiscal empowerment is not being done for only one reason, because one segment, one institution of the country wants to run the entire country. They are servants. It's not their job. Qaid-e-Azam had also made it very clear. Your job is to look after something else, not this. So when you leave it, the establishment today, as you refer to in Pakistan, comprises of the judiciary, the army, the civil bureaucracy, and their selected politicians. This is a gang of 2.6 million people or less that have taken 220 million people as captives. This is nonsensical. It is unacceptable. So when you're talking about how will this happen, how will it will change very simply. Dish out money, empower the population. Whether they are literate or they are not literate, they can count money. I can assure you. The minute they have the money, no power on earth can hold them back. Then the second aspect about land holding, what has been suggested in the current chronicles is corporate agriculture. You want to have land? Fine. You want to have 1,000 acres, 2,000 acres, 5,000 acres? Sure, go ahead. You are regulated by a regulator for production. You can have as much acreage as you want, you pay taxes on it, you produce from it. And if you want to employ somebody, it has to be on a contract, and you have to pay proper compensation for labor. They want captive labor. And all over the world, they are advertising that we are a country where the labor is cheap and we are a poor country. Who gave you that authority to project us as cheap labor? It's a cheap advertisement.
Thank you for watching. Click the videos on screen to watch more and make sure to subscribe for upcoming videos. Let the winds of change blow